Welcome back to Beyond Four Walls, Conversations on Affordable Housing. I'm David Dworkin, President and CEO of the National Housing Conference, the nation's oldest and broadest affordable housing coalition. On December 3rd, the National Housing Conference hosted our annual Solutions for Affordable Housing convening at the National Press Club. We were joined by nearly 350 housing leaders from across the country to discuss tangible, impactful, and achievable solutions to the nation's most critical housing challenges. In today's episode, we revisit my fireside chat with Congressman Mike Flood, Chairman of the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee. We discussed his bipartisan work on the Home Reform Act, ongoing negotiations around major housing legislation, the path forward for the enterprises Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the status of government funding. Since our discussion, Congress released the updated National Defense Authorization Act, which was a potential vehicle for bipartisan housing legislation. As of the recording of this podcast, the House was reportedly planning to vote on the updated NDAA on December 10th. The original Senate-passed version included Senators Scott and Warren's bipartisan Road to Housing Act, and the Senate, House, and White House were in negotiations on including a housing package inclusive of some or all of the Road to Housing Act in the updated NDAA. No housing provisions were included, but this conversation remains in play, and my hope is that by the time you hear this, you'll say, oh, that already passed. To view the conversation in its entirety and other sessions from the Solutions for Affordable Housing Conference, visit nhc.org. All right. I am thrilled to introduce our next speaker, who is joining us for a fireside chat. We don't have a fire. We did actually have a fire alarm once, and everybody had to walk down 13 floors, and then they came back. So hopefully that won't happen. But Congressman Mike Flood represents Nebraska's 1st congressional district and is actively working to tackle the nation's affordable housing shortage in Congress by advancing solutions that increase supply, reduce regulatory barriers, and encourage innovative approaches to development. As chairman of the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee, he has demonstrated substantive thought leadership and a commitment to practical problem solving, working closely with Ranking Member Emanuel Cleaver on the development of the Home Reform Act of 2025. Together, they introduced this bipartisan proposal to modernize the Federal Home Investment Partnership Program, streamlining outdated requirements, giving states and localities greater flexibility, and helping communities more effectively increase housing supply and improve affordability. This effort is a testament to the power of bipartisan leadership in confronting the nation's housing challenges and ensuring continued investment in one of our most essential housing production programs. Chairman Flood will also be leading figure in efforts to address the 17-year-long conservatorships of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I know you can't wait to get your teeth into that one. So please join me in welcoming Chairman Mike Flood.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, wow, it's been great getting a chance to know you and work with you. It shouldn't be this groundbreaking,
I know.
But it is. You've done widespread consultations with all kinds of participants who use the program. You worked with your colleague across the aisle to come up with a proposal and then negotiated it with your colleagues. And today you had a hearing. You're already in record-setting territory, and we haven't even got to the markup yet. So tell me a little bit about the bill but the process too, and where we are and where we need to be.
Well, I've been in Congress for 3.5 years. Many of you have been on the ground in your communities across the nation in housing for decades. And I am just pleased to tell you, you're in Washington right now when there are active negotiations happening between the House and the Senate on major historic housing policy that will be bipartisan nature. And, Elizabeth Warren on the Senate side with the Republican Tim Scott, on our side, French Hill and Maxine Waters. I just sat through a housing hearing all day today. I sat next to our ranking member, Waters. She was kind of filling me in on her side and what she's hearing with the conversations about housing policy. But I can speak to how we got to where we're at on the House side. When I became the chair of the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, I reached out to my Republican members, and I reached out to Mr. Cleaver, who's the longtime ranking member on the Democratic side. He's from Kansas City. I represent Lincoln, Nebraska, just a few hours north. And I just said, hey, two things. Number one, we're going to do this together because nothing happens if we don't get 60 votes in the Senate, and you're an important part of that. And number two, I haven't been here long enough, but I can see the long game, and there's going to be a time when I'm not the chairman and I will be the ranking member, and I'm going to treat him like I want to be treated if I'm in that spot someday, which is consulted and active, because I don't want to waste my time in Congress either. So Mr. Cleaver and he's a gem of a guy. When he tells you something, he means it. He doesn't hide the ball. And we worked on, basically we said to all of these different organizations across the state or nation, whether it be NeighborWorks, Habitat, commercial developers, nonprofit developers, states, cities, municipalities, send us your ideas on how you'd remodel the home partnership program. We got 144 submissions. Him and I each picked 12. We spent 6 hours. We interviewed all 24 for about 15 minutes each and took notes on what they told us. And ironically, and you know this more than anybody, housing is not a partisan issue. The program is what the program is, and it's been the program that way for a long time, because the last time this was really amended in law was 1992. And so we heard common themes about barriers to using the money more effectively. NEPA, the environmental reviews, the Section 3 requirements, the Build America, Buy America piece of this, some of the eligibility. You know, if you are a low-income situation, that doesn't mean that you want to live in a low-income area. Like, we want your kids to have the same access to the best schools, the best parks, the best amenities, because that's how you create socially mobile young people. And so we agreed on a lot of things. There were some things we weren't able to get to the table on, but guess what? That's a negotiation, right? We've all been through negotiation, which means I don't take my ball and go home when I don't get every single thing I want. I just hope the Senate has the same idea on this as we merge theirs and ours. And I don't think they will. And what's so great about this year, it's like the stars aligned. The Senate, which is where most good ideas go to die, they actually beat us getting a bill out and passed on the floor. Now, maybe I don't agree with everything in their bill, but I certainly agree with their enthusiasm and the good things in their bill that are going to be groundbreaking. Some of those ideas came from bills that I introduced in the House. I'm just hopeful that, when the NDAA passes as early as next week, you could have major housing policy that's done on a bipartisan basis that Elizabeth Warren and Mike Flood are equally as excited about. And so that's what we want. So let's see. Yeah. We had a great press conference, Mr. Cleaver and I did, and one of the four people we had speak is sitting right here. And you know what's so sad about that? And all the press conferences you can do, a press conference where Democrats and Republicans come together on an issue that most Americans have on their minds is affordable housing. Why doesn't that run on Fox News or CNN? Like, we have to demand more from our media, because you're being fed, like my parents are being fed, like our families are being fed. You're being fed information every single day that gets you angrier and angrier and angrier. Sometimes it makes you so angry you run into somebody from the opposite party, and without even realizing it, you're calculating in your mind how much you don't like them because you've been fed all this information. But had you watched that press conference and the breaking news thing came out on your favorite national network, and you saw Mr. Cleaver and I standing there with him and others across the nation, you'd be like, yeah, that's the America I signed up for. That's the Congress I expect. And we have to remember that narrative does not sell in the media. And it's not going to resonate because no one's going to give it the time, because we aren't screaming at each other. Now, if Emmanuel and I went to grab each other's throats and beat each other down, we would be instant celebrities, right? That would never happen, but I thought I'd just offer that, because that's the hard part of Congress when you go home and somebody's so mad about everything. It's like, well, I am doing my job. Like, I'm working with the Democrats and the Republicans to pass a bill.
It's interesting because, as you know, Congressman Cleaver was here a few hours ago, and one of the things he said is that dynamic isn't good for the country, it's not good for our politics, but it's not good for the people who actually participate in it, that they take that feeling home with them and they have to live with that in their head. And I thought that was really insightful, because it isn't good for anybody to carry that resentment.
Well, I'm a Republican. I come from a Republican state. I have people say, how come you're not out there fighting for me like Marjorie Taylor Greene is? Marjorie Taylor Greene quitting Congress was not on my bingo card at all. But I'm like, well, I am out there fighting for you. I'm actually working on the bills, and I'm fighting for you by treating people nice, like not screaming and yelling at people. And when the mayor of San Diego comes into my office, instead of saying, no, I'm not going to meet with him, he's a prominent California Democrat, I'm like, welcome on in. Like, I can learn something from you. And, when the Los Angeles, the head of the county board out there comes out after the fires, she starts thanking for having the meeting and just hearing what is going on in the Palisades. And I said, ma'am, you need to know, like, the people in Nebraska felt terrible for your whole community when that happened. Just like we would hope that people in Southern California would feel bad for a small Nebraska town wiped off the map by a tornado. Nobody I represent wants to see anything bad happen to people in California, They would be upset at me in Nebraska if I treated you poorly. That's not how we were raised. That's not how we operate as a state, So these are such basic things. And I'm sure there'll come a time when I have a temper tantrum and I'll regret ever saying this, but that's what this process on housing has taught me. And by the way, I really have nothing to celebrate yet because nothing has been passed and nothing has been signed into law. So let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Well, that's right. And we're not going to quit working until we,
Yes.
truly congratulating you and everybody else for getting this done. Housing has a big box of participant ribbons, but no medals. So
right.
It's been a while. So we also have a CR deadline coming up in January.
Yeah.
And what are the prospects of passing a full year CR, particularly in the housing space? Because we have this interesting dynamic where we also have a bipartisan housing appropriations title on the Senate side, those guys, and that's come over, and we have the option of that or a CR. Where are we going with that? And because it didn't go so well in the beginning of the year.
No, it didn't. But we did, nobody's really paying attention to this part of it. When we did extend the government funding from the end of the shutdown to January 30th, included in that CR were 3 major appropriations bills that went the full year. It was MILCON VA, so veterans homes and military construction. It was ag, so that's SNAP and nutrition and farm programs. And it was Ledge Branch, which pays ourselves and it provides for our security now after some political violence. So those 3 bills out of 12, that all 12 constitute our federal budget. That's the first time since 2018 we passed any budget bills. And so if all we get is a CR on January 30th, then we've failed the American people again. That means the same budget from the Biden, Schumer, House Republican era is still in effect. It doesn't address our national defense needs. It doesn't address our THUD needs or our housing needs. And so I'm the chairman of the Main Street Caucus, which is like 85, I like to say, pragmatic, conservative, problem-solving Republicans that want to get things done. And we welcomed Susan Collins in. She's the top Republican appropriator in the Senate. And before she came, we had 2 major players on appropriations in the House. So Ken Calvert from California, who cares about defense appropriations, sat here. And Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida sat on the other side of her. And then I was worked into the mix, and we just lobbied her hard to say we really want a couple more bills before Christmas. If we could pass a couple of bills before Christmas, and we proposed to her that they do the transportation, housing, and urban development, because that's our housing, the bill on the interior, which is our national parks and a lot of different programs, and then the bill on NatSec, which is like CIA, all the different intelligence, CFIUS, all those different programs. If we could have those 3 bills get sent over by the Senate and we could pass them in the House like we just did with the 3 bills that you just saw, and the president could sign that going into Christmas, that would be like the best show of we've got our act together to the rest of the conference. Because if those 3 things got done, we would be halfway there, and all we have to do is really the hard stuff in January. The reason we want it to only be those 3 bills is if the bill gets too big, then people on our side start saying omnibus, pork fest, bad for America. And so what Susan Collins is saying to us is she's saying, well, we could do those 3 bills, but she goes, the reason you all want THUD in there is because it has all your earmarks. She says, we put our earmarks in the Labor H bill, and the Labor H bill has to ride on the same rail as the Department of Defense bill. And if we send you over all 5, that's probably how it'll come. And we could then send back just 3 and go that way. But, the fact that we're having this conversation, she said, I know people are worked up, but this is the first time since 2018 we're actually funding the government with our updated budget. So That's a really good sign. And if you're keeping track at home, you get to Christmas, ask yourself, was the Congress able to get 1 to 5 bills passed before Christmas and signed? If the answer to that question is yes, then we are really in a good spot. If the answer to that question is no, January is going to be a lot tougher than it really should be.
Mm. Well, T-HUD is definitely on my bingo card.
Mine too.
So you had a hearing today, a long list of bills that were on. You were there. We were here. How did it go? And
well, it was great. The guy from the National Association of Realtors, he was colorful. Are they here today? Yeah,
they are here.
He was telling a story about when he was a Division I athlete. He was a diver, and then in the summers he would work at like Six Flags. And he said, I would go dive, and then they would light me on fire going into the pool. I was like, that kind of sounds like Congress right there.
Really?
But, we had a very good conversation. We talked a lot more about lot size than I have talked about it all year. And there was somebody there from AEI that wanted to say how important it was to, I get ADUs and all that stuff and lot size and getting cities to allow smaller homes. I think that's all important. But we really shouldn't in the Congress be in the middle of zoning at the community level. And so one of the witnesses talked a lot about that, which was enlightening. It was kind of love fest. Republicans and Democrats, save and except a few Democrats who wanted to talk more about Donald Trump than housing, which is how the game is played. It went pretty well, I think. What's ironic here, this is not Republicans versus Democrats. This is people in the Senate on both parties are pretty proud of what they did, and we're just getting ours marked up, right? So we're trying to catch up to the bus that's like 20 feet ahead of us with our bill and saying, hey, before you do that, you got to include some of these. And I don't think we're asking for too much. We're remodeling the program they said needed to be remodeled, which is Home Partnership Act. So we're in a pretty good spot. And now this is above my pay grade. This is French Hill and Maxine Waters working with Elizabeth Warren and Tim Scott, and then the White House is the 5th seat. And the negotiation is going to be what it's going to be. And I have to remember, be gracious if you don't get everything. Be upset if you get nothing, right? So
that works for me.
Yeah.
I was asked by one of the staffers, so what's the most important thing to you? And I said, yes.
Yes.
Getting it passed. You put it in there and you get it passed, it is my most important thing. I will give you a second level list, but let's get something done. Don't use what I have to say to limit in any way what you all do. So markup is next. When do we see that, and what should we expect?
Within the next 2 weeks, we'll have something marked up. Now, here's the problem. For us, the ship is sailing next week. If we're going to get in the NDAA, like right now, I know that Mr. Hill, our chairman, is sitting in the Speaker's office advocating in the House for what we want. So it's a little bit out of my hands. I've done all the putting it together. We've shaped it all up. We've made all the amendments. We've found the bipartisan agreement. Now it's in the hands of my chairman, and I just have to wait to see how that negotiation goes and then jump in if he wants me in there.
How can we help?
Well, kindly call your senators and tell them how much the House version matters to you. And I would say just continue to show support. One of the things that Kurt in my office is doing is trying to put out to as many of you kind of where we're at and what we could use. And it's important, with your Democratic colleagues, make sure they're up to speed. They may see this bill come out of financial services, and there's a Democrat that that's on Ways and Means, and he's going to say, well, what's this thing? And say, hey, we like it. They treated us well. They worked with us on this housing bill. So just a general support for the House's work on housing is helpful with any member that you know. And of course, to your Senate friends as well.
So in our last couple minutes, let's solve the problem of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Yeah. We had a panel discuss this. I know that because you have an extra week you can sit here, we'll probably get to it, but you've been doing a lot of consultations on this, learning a lot. Some of us have been stuck in the weeds on this for decades. And so maybe we're the last people to ask, what are you seeing as a relative newcomer to this issue as you talk to folks?
Well, so I've only been at this level for 3.5 years. Before that, I was at the state level where we didn't have anything to do with Freddie and Fannie. It's exceedingly complex. And I was really heartened when the Treasury Secretary told a small group of us House Financial Services Republicans that he wanted to be very slow and very deliberate. And he was using numbers like 2027. And I think that's good. Like most of us in the House Financial Services Committee have not been here during the financial crisis, nor were we here during the establishment of the conservatorship or Jeb Hezerling's efforts to end it. Here's what I know. You can ask all the questions you want about the GSEs. At the end of each conversation, I say, so do you want the implicit guarantee to go away? And I was like, because you just said you want to privatize it. And they're like, well, of course not. Of course not. And I'm like, well, then we're not privatizing this the way I think of privatization before I started as the chairman. But I do think, look at the role of a small town bank. Used to be if you wanted a home loan, you went to your small town bank. They knew the real estate market. They took the risk, 50, 30 years ago, you dealt with the banker. Now they package it up and they sell it to Freddie and Fannie, and they mortgage-backed securities take it away from there. And then comes along all the federal farm programs. Well, yeah, we'll get the paperwork filled out for you, but we'll send that to Washington. I'd like to see our capital requirements for banks get adjusted so that bankers are on the ground floor. And they should want this because, if you're a small town bank in the middle of Nebraska, someday JP Morgan Chase is going to have all the technology, all the expectations, they can do everything. And these small town banks that write the check for the yearbook, they're gone. So I would think the more we can get banks in the middle of housing again, the better it will be for our communities. I love the federal home loan bank system. I think that is a gift to America that we should protect and cherish. And a lot of community banks use them. So we can learn a lot more from them than we can, I think, the GSEs in terms of duty to serve, rural America, manufactured housing, affordable housing. And I think you'll hear more from Treasury about capital requirement changes to get banks more interested in housing. And that would all be a good thing. But let's talk about the unintended consequences. So yes, privatizing Freddie and Fannie fits with my ethos. But let me throw this at you. One thing that's happened since they've essentially become one, more or less, under the conservatorship, we now have this thing called the uniform MBS, mortgage-backed security. And investors really like it, right? They know what's in it, whether it's Freddie or Fannie. So if we deprivatize them and we take them out of conservatorship, suddenly the uniform MBS no longer exists. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does inject some uncertainty into a market that we want the rates to go down in. And that could have an impact on that. And that's just one little issue that Congressional Research Service flagged for me. And so that's the kind of stuff we have to be worried about if we're going to make any changes. And I see we're running out of time.
And you said the magic letters, UMBS, because if a congressman is talking about UMBS, you are absolutely learning a lot. So thank you for that. And I also want to just note for you before we go that I was just asked to send some ideas over to the White House on housing. And one of them was reducing capital on AD&C loans for small lenders, because this is how these construction loans get made.
Yeah.
And who makes them? And, we shouldn't be penalizing folks for doing exactly what we need them to do.
Great. I appreciate everything you're doing. And thanks for having him at the helm. And thank you all for your help. And if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out to our office. Kurt Bliamptis is an absolute gem. He's here somewhere. And he is the brains behind the gavels.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this edition of Beyond Four Walls. You can visit the National Housing Conference at nhc.org. There you can learn more about affordable housing policies, affordability challenges throughout the nation on our Paycheck to Paycheck database, and explore membership in NHC for you or your organization. We appreciate your interest and look forward to working with you in the future. Until next time, I'm David Dworkin, NHC's President and CEO, wishing you a great day.
This podcast was edited by Resonate Recordings.